The crisis in the Middle East, probably like no other crisis, reveals the doublespeak of U.S. foreign policy. The U.S. basically gave Israel green light to any of their actions with regards to Palestinians. And Israel has been taking advantage of that quite extensively because, as President Obama explained,
there's no country on earth that would tolerate missiles raining down on its citizens from outside its borders.
Makes complete sense. Nobody should. But one may ask, what about all those countries that the U.S. has bombed? Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, and others? Or is it that when you refer to civilian deaths as collateral damage, somehow killing civilians sounds more justified? When it comes to the Gaza situation, you usually hear U.S. officials speak along these lines. Of course, in a conflict like this, civilian casualties are inevitable. But the U.S. is not always like that. When the Assad government was killing civilians, the U.S. stood first to sympathize with the innocents there in most graphic terms. But it appears in Washington, sympathy for suffering can be selective. This is Hillary Clinton on Syria.
The shooting death of a one-year-old recently by the Syrian regime's tanks and troops is a very stark example of what is going on.
One may ask, what about those horrible shots of children dying in Gaza? Is it somehow a less stark example of what's going on? It seems America's world police mindset and the standing up for the weak thing doesn't apply to Palestinians. Instead, we hear the same mantra from U.S. officials, that is, Israel has the right to defend itself, which effectively implies that in the eyes of Washington, the killing of civilians in Gaza is justified. The U.S. has most recently blocked the UN Security Council statement calling for ceasefire in the Israeli-Gaza conflict, deeming the proposed statement unbalanced against Israel, just as the U.S. has blocked all other Palestinian-related UN resolutions in the past, whether it was on Israel continuing to build settlements on occupied territories or other initiatives put forward to ease the years-long suppression of the people there. By blocking all efforts of the international community to mediate a solution, Washington contributes to the status quo. And the status quo here is that the root causes of the crisis have not been addressed. And as the root causes remain, any ceasefire looks temporary. There was a major Israeli assault on Gaza 4 years ago, killed more than 1,000 people, did not solve the problem. So one may argue the status quo almost guarantees that the cycle of violence will continue.
And